It all started in a crumbling shed behind a modest home in post-war Germany. The air smelled of oil and ambition. The walls were lined not with tools of luxury, but scraps, discarded engine parts, rusting bolts, and makeshift tools crafted by hand. A young man named Franz Zimmer, just 23, worked tirelessly under a flickering bulb, often with frozen fingers and an empty stomach. He didn't have a factory. He didn't have investors. All he had was a dream and the audacity to believe he could create something that could rival the finest machines in the world. Franz had been obsessed with engineering since childhood. While others saw wrecked vehicles as junk, he saw possibility. He spent years collecting discarded parts from junkyards, military surplus, and even abandoned tanks. By day, he worked at a rail depot. By night, he built, sketched, rewatted alone, and despite every voice telling him he was chasing shadows, he kept going. That shed, it didn't just smell like oil, it reeked of defiance. Franz wasn't just tinkering. He was designing. On a warped wooden table covered in grease-stained blueprints, he drafted a vehicle that didn't yet exist. A Frankenstein of old aircraft parts and salvaged motorcycle cylinders, all modified to fit together like an impossible puzzle. Every bolt he tightened, every wire he fused, he whispered to himself, "They'll see." There were no manuals, no computers, just instinct and obsession. He studied the aerodynamics of fighter planes, the efficiency of wartime motorcycles, and the mechanical soul of every vehicle he could get his hands on. What he envisioned wasn't just a carrot, was a symbol, a machine that would prove that innovation didn't require wealth, only willpower. He began crafting the frame from salvaged steel beams, cutting them down to size using a hand-powered hacksaw, the engine. For months, neighbors thought he was crazy. Some laughed, others pitied him, but Franz kept going. And deep inside that cold garage, a revolution began to take shape, one piston at a time. One bitter morning, after nearly a year of relentless labor, Franz stood before his creation. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't polished. The paint was uneven, the seams slightly crooked, and the leather seat was stitched from an old bomber jacket. The battery was a hand-cranked setup pulled from an abandoned radio tower. He turned the key, he adjusted the spark plugs, checked the pressure valves, and tried again. Silence, but it was his. A machine born from nothing but grit and scavenged parts. He called it simply Project 1. Project 1. With trembling hands, he poured a few ounces of homemade fuel into the tank. But on the fourth try, the garage erupted. The engine coughed, sputtered, and roared to life, and drove Project 1 straight out of the garage and into history. Thick smoke filled the room, and Franz broke into tears, his face lit not just by the engine's fire, but by vindication. Outside, the sound drew a small crowd. People peeked in, expecting failure, but what they saw was raw motion steel and fire. Built by a man who had no business succeeding. Franz didn't smile, he didn't wave. He simply sat down, gripped the steering wheel. The streets of Munich had never seen anything like it. Project 1 rattled and growled down the cobblestone roads like a beast waking from a long slumber. Mechanics leaned out of their shops, tools still in hand. A few war veterans, hardened by silence, nodded quietly as the machine passed. To them, it wasn't just a carrot, it was a symbol of resurrection. It was crude, loud, and unlike anything anyone had built. Post-war, but it moved. And not just moved, accelerated with purpose. Children chased behind it. Franz didn't stop to show off. He had a destination, a local industrial fair that showcased homemade inventions. The organizers hadn't invited him. He had no name, no company, and certainly no pedigree. But he didn't care. He parked outside the fairgrounds, threw open the hood of Project 1, and let the machine speak for itself. Within minutes, a crowd formed. Engineers asked questions. Investors scribbled notes. A reporter from a local paper snapped a photograph that would become legendary. A soot-covered young man standing next to a machine stitched from the bones of broken machines. In that moment, Franz wasn't just a mechanic, he was a disruptor. For every admirer, there were doubters. The day after the industrial fair, headlines buzzed with curiosity. Homemade car shocks engineers. Young inventor dares to challenge giants. But in boardrooms across Germany, auto executives scoffed. To them, Franz Zimmer was a sideshow, an amusement. There, with the help of 3 loyal mechanics he met at the fair, soldiers turned dreamers, he began building Project 2. He sourced better materials, studied chassis dynamics, and even taught himself leathercraft to hand-stitch the interior. The team worked through blizzards with no heat, eating canned beans by the engine's glow. Failure hovered constantly, but so did momentum. They laughed over Brandy, saying, "You can't build a luxury brand from junk," but Franz didn't flinch. With a few small grants trickling in and a surge of public fascination, he moved from the garage to an abandoned textile warehouse on the city's edge. This time, it wasn't just about proving he could build a car. Now, he wanted elegance, power, precision. Meanwhile, whispers began echoing through the streets. Zimmer might be onto something, and in smoky offices, the executives stopped laughing. Project Zwei was nothing like its predecessor. Sleek, streamlined, and gleaming in a deep navy blue finish. It looked like something that belonged on a Royal Boulevard lot in a scrapyard, but more than its beauty, it was what lay beneath the hood that stirred awe. A custom-built inline six engine, smoother than anything Franz had ever touched, roared with the confidence of a new era. It could hit 100 kilometers per hour in under 10 seconds, a feat unheard of for a home-built machine in post-war Europe. When Franz unveiled it at the 1951 Berlin Motor Show, he didn't even have a company name. That name already exists. It's owned by the state. They shut down after the war. He became a founder. One of the show officials leaned in and asked, "What do you call this marvel?" Franz paused, then said softly, "Bayerisch Motorwerk." The man raised a brow. Franz smiled. "Then I'll revive it." That night, with little more than grit and borrowed ink, Franz filed a claim to resurrect the dormant name, BMW. That was the moment Franz Zimmer stopped being a mechanic. The rebirth of BMW didn't sit well with the old guard. Former stakeholders, government officials, and rival automakers began circling like vultures. Franz had legally revived the brand name Jespa. He hadn't yet proven he could protect it. Lawsuits loomed. Threats arrived daily. Some offered to buy him out. Others tried to bury him in legal red tape. He retained legal rights to the BMW name. It was a stunning victory, not just for him, but for every underdog watching from the shadows. But Franz had already fought a harder war with hunger, cold, and obscurity. This was just paperwork. He hired a defiant young lawyer named Elsa Hunberli, 30, fiercely intelligent, and as fearless as he was. Together, they fought through courtrooms and conference halls, dodging every trap, countering every claim. Meanwhile, Project Zwei continued to turn heads across Europe. Wealthy clients from Italy and France placed private orders, ignoring the industry's warnings. They didn't care about lawsuits, they cared about the way the car felt. By the end of the year, the German courts sided with Franz. And behind the frosted glass of Munich's tallest buildings, executives stared out in silence, realizing that Franz Zimmer wasn't going away. He was building an empire. With victory in hand and orders piling up, Franz faced his next mountain. Scaling the warehouse that once echoed with the clatter of hand tools was now too small, too crude. He needed a real production line, but he didn't. He wanted to become what he had once rebelled against, a soulless machine stamping out cars with no heart. So he reimagined the assembly process. Each craftsman was trained not just to assemble, but to understand to treat each car like a story, not a product. Franz walked the floor daily, sleeves rolled, grease on his hands, inspecting every frame, every weld. If something felt off, it was redone. No shortcuts. By 1953, American buyers were taking notice. One luxury importer from New York called it the German car that drives like it dreams. Orders from the US tripled. Celebrities in Europe began requesting custom BMWs with personal finishes engraved dashboards, hand-stitched initials, polished chrome bumpers, no compromises, and the cars. They weren't just machines anymore, they were experiences. He had built the name. Now he wanted to build the legend. Word spread. What had begun in a broken-down shed was now rolling off the line and into showrooms beside Jaguars and Bentleys. But Franz didn't stop. To Franz Zimmer, true recognition didn't come from wealth or celebrity endorsements. It came from speed, from grit. Reporters visited the factory. Engineers from rival companies tried to peek inside. But what they didn't see was Franz's obsession with balance. He poured hours into perfecting the weight distribution, tuning the suspension for hairpin turns and shaving every possible ounce from the chassis. Even the windshield was a custom curvature designed not for looks, but for slipstream advantage. From victory earned in the unforgiving world of motorsport, if BMW was going to be respected globally, it needed to prove itself where steel met asphalt, a race infamous for destroying even the most finely tuned machines. Spectators laughed at the idea of a garage-born BMW standing against giants like Ferrari and Mercedes, and hesitation meant defeat. Engine screaming, crowd stunned, the legend of BMW wasn't just revived. In 1954, he unveiled Project Drea Loslung aerodynamic beast designed specifically for racing. It wasn't built in secret this time. Franz entered Project Dry into the Nürburgring Grand Prix, but on race day, when Project Dry flew past the grandstands tight on corners, fearless on the straights, it silenced everyone. Franz didn't just want to compete, he wanted to win. And as Project Dry crossed the finish line that afternoon, first place, it was reborn on the track. Victory brought attention, fame, and pressure. Franz Zimmer became a reluctant icon featured on magazine covers, invited to elite gatherings, even offered partnerships by the same men who once mocked him, but he remained grounded. He still drove to the factory in an old Project ZY. He still ate lunch with his engineers, sitting on crates in the break room, sleeves rolled, hair dusted with metal shavings. When asked by a reporter what success meant to him, he answered quietly, "It means I can keep building." But behind that humility was a relentless fire. Franz pushed his team harder than ever. Fuel injection innovations ideas that other companies dismissed as fantasy, BMW turned into reality. He launched new prototypes. He just worked. And somehow, that spoke louder than any words ever could. Invested in cutting-edge research and recruited dreamers from every corner of Euro, people who had been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, or rich enough to matter. To Franz, passion was the only resume worth reading. By 1956, BMW wasn't just making luxury vehicles, it was shaping the future. Electric ignition systems, lightweight alloys, and through it all, Franz never gave a single motivational speech. But success casts long shadows that not all of them can be outrun. By late 1956, the pressure began to fracture the very foundations Franz had built. The demand for BMW vehicles was outpacing production. Quality control slipped. One high-profile customer returned a car with a cracked transmission, and the press pounced. Mistakes increased, morale dipped, and Franz, who had always been present, always steady, began showing signs of exhaustion. His hands, once so sure, now trembled when holding a wrench. His sketches grew fewer, his silence grew longer. Investors, once eager, now whispered about replacing leadership. Rivals launched smear campaigns, claiming BMW had grown too fast, too recklessly. Inside the factory, workers felt the weight. The man who built an empire from scrap had disappeared behind office doors, nursing doubts louder than any engine he'd ever made. Then came the real blow. Elsa Hahn, the fiery lawyer and one of his earliest allies, announced she was leaving to start her own legal firm. It wasn't betrayal, it was evolution. But for Franz, it felt like the end of an era. That winter, he retreated from the public eye. No interviews, no factory visits, the world wondered. Was Franz Zimmer done? Silence can break a man or sharpen him. In the quiet of his office, surrounded by sketches of old dreams and faded headlines, Franz Zimmer didn't wallow. He listened to the rattling in the factory pipes, to the tension in his team's voices, to the world outside, changing fast, demanding faster. He realized BMW didn't just need another car, it needed a turning point. For weeks, he stayed late, lights burning long after the city slept. He revisited everything: frame structure, weight ratios, even seat ergonomics. Then, one morning, he pinned a single sketch to the wall, sleek, aggressive, yet minimal. Beneath it, he scribbled two words in bold pencil. It would blend power with practicality, precision with elegance. And with a calm voice and tired eyes, he said, "A car for the modern driver, not just the elite, the new E-Class." The new class, it would be BMW's rebirth, lighter, faster, more efficient than anything they'd made before. But he knew this wasn't a one-man miracle, so he brought his team together. Every designer, every welder, every skeptical veteran. Let's build something the world will chase, not copy. And just like that, the machines roared back to life. In 1961, instead, it spoke with clean lines, perfect balance, and engineering that felt effortless. It was the first of its kind to combine sports car precision with everyday usability, a family sedan that could outmaneuver race cars. It was too bold to be conservative, too refined to be radical. But when the first customers got behind the wheel, the verdict was immediate and electric. They felt it in the corners, in the climb of the tachometer, and the quiet roar of a car that wanted to be driven. By the end of 1963, the new E-Class had not only revived BMW, it had redefined what a modern car could be. And suddenly, Franz Zimmer wasn't just that madman from the garage, he was the man who changed driving itself. By the mid-1960s, BMW was no longer a whisper among giants, it was the giant. But unlike other automotive empires, BMW carried its soul into every model. The DNA of Project 1 still pulsed through every curve, every hum of the engine. Franz Zimmer had made sure of it. He refused to let the company become a lifeless machine of mass production. The 2002 Model, direct descendant of the new E-Class, became a cult icon in America. College kids and CEOs alike drove them not for status, but for sensation. BMW wasn't just a badge, it was a bond between driver and machine. He made one thing clear: we don't build cars, we craft experiences. Margins, but in the quiet moment when a driver turned the key and smiled, and the world listened. And something radical at the time: fuel economy without compromise. While the rest of the industry was reacting to trends, BMW was quietly inventing them. Motorsport titles began stacking up, but Franz wasn't done. He launched BMW's first research center in Munich, focusing on future technologies, turbocharging, emissions reduction, and through it all, Franz kept his desk near the factory floor. He still believed greatness wasn't found in press releases or profit. In 1972, at the age of 53, Franz Zimmer stood alone at the edge of the BMW test track, watching the company's latest prototype of sleek, turbocharged coupe slice through the morning mist. Decades had passed since he first fired up a crude engine in a freezing garage. Now, the cars bore his vision, his discipline, his fire, but something else had grown to a sense of peace. That year, at the peak of BMW's global dominance, Franz quietly stepped down from day-to-day operations. No grand farewell, no media storm. He left with the same humility he'd built, with hands dirty, heart full. His final request: that the chair at the head of the engineering floor remain empty. A reminder of where the company started, not with money, not with fame, but with purpose. Franz retired to a modest countryside home near Lake Tegernsee. Every gear shift, every rush of wind through a slightly cracked window at 90 miles per hour, whispered the legacy of a man who built everything from nothing and gave the world machines that moved more than wheels. Where he spent his days rebuilding antique motorcycles and mentoring young engineers who traveled miles just to sit at his kitchen table. He never wrote a memoir, never appeared in ads. When asked why, he simply said, "The cars speak louder than I ever could," and he was right. Every curve of a BMW, they moved hearts. Today, when a brand new BMW rolls off the line in Munich or is test-driven through the winding roads of California, most people don't think about the past. They see horsepower stats, tech specs, sleek interiors. But beneath that polished surface, Franz Zimmer's fingerprints remain. He never held a formal engineering degree, never had backing from banks or billionaires. Yet he built a legacy that outlived him, not because he followed trends, but because he defied them. You can still hear it, that faint heartbeat from a cold garage in post-war Germany. A whisper that says, he proved that craftsmanship still matters. That one man with vision and fire can outpace an entire industry. And somewhere, maybe in the hum of the engine, in the grip of the wheel, built by hand, powered by heart. That is the true story of how a young man with nothing rebuilt BMW from the ashes, not as a business, but as a legend.